Iran is facing a major maritime embargo. The Persian Gulf has turned into a boiling cauldron. In recent days, the largest military deployment in history has taken shape. As the regime issues fearful threats, dozens of warships, hundreds of fighter aircraft, and stealth bombers are on maximum alert. Reza Pahlavi's request for air support was answered in Washington. Trump's response was swift. "We sent a massive armada there." Trump's armada is no longer a threat. It is now an operational reality. As Khamenei canceled his Friday sermon and retreated to his bunker, the skies over Tehran trembled with the buzz of drones. International airlines pulled out of the region, leaving the airspace to fighter jets and Tomahawk missiles alone. The countdown is over. The Middle East is about to be shaken. The escalating activity that began on the night of January 23, 2026, went far beyond a routine patrol, placing the region at the center of a full-scale war simulation. The rout of the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, the most critical element of the U.S. military presence, became the biggest mystery of the past several days. Although the Lincoln normally patrols the Pacific to pressure China, a sudden Pentagon order quickly redirected it toward the Middle East. It is now blocking the Strait of Hormuz. Open-source intelligence breaks down data and satellite imagery, revealing pieces of what the United States calls its immense armada. At the center of the operation is the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, hosting a massive air wing made up of F-35C and F/A-18E/F Super Hornets. However, the true turning point was the historic appeal by Iran's Crown Prince, Reza Pahlavi, following the deaths of 20,000 protesters. Pahlavi stated that the Iranian people urgently need to be in the streets, but completely unarmed, and that air support is required. This call shifted the Trump administration's stance from non-intervention to decisive military doctrine. Immediately after this appeal, 36 F-15E Strike Eagle fighter jets landed at Mawafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan. This topic is heavily restricted in mainstream media and on some social platforms. YouTube's algorithm also considers it risky, but that does not matter to us. We will continue telling you the truth using the most accurate data available. You can support this work by liking the video to help break through the algorithm barrier without clickbait. This activity represents the embodiment of the Pentagon's doctrine of decisive force. Open-source intelligence data shows that the fleet deployed in the region is not just a collection of ships, but a vast logistical and electronic warfare umbrella that surrounds Iran like a cage. Within this colossal demonstration of force, made up of 7,800 assets that Trump himself called an armada, lies immense power. This formation, centered on the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, goes far beyond a typical carrier deployment, transforming into an air and naval force of between 200 and 250 units. Once escorts were added, including Arleigh Burke-class destroyers such as the USS Mitchell and USS McFall, along with Virginia-class nuclear submarines, the naval force expanded to between 6 and 8 ships, while more than 100 fighter aircraft and bombers coordinated operations overhead. This is not just a standard carrier strike group configuration. It represents a regional control capability, supported by an air defense umbrella exceeding 40,000 personnel in total, and reinforced by THAAD batteries, with the explicit goal of completely dismantling Iran's asymmetric warfare doctrine carried out through proxy forces. At the center of the operation is the USS Abraham Lincoln, anchored in the Gulf of Oman. At nearly 330 meters in length, it is a floating fortress. This massive aircraft carrier, together with its Carrier Air Wing 9, protects an air force of approximately 90 aircraft, including F/A-18E Super Hornets, stealth fighters, F-35C jets, and EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft, positioned just minutes from Iran's coastline. This time, however, the strategy is based on a hybrid destruction plan that combines naval power with land-based assets in Jordan and Qatar. The Pentagon deployed a total of 36 F-15E Strike Eagle aircraft to Mawafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan. These aircraft were not chosen at random. The F-15 remains the most proven platform in the U.S. inventory and has the capability to carry and precisely deliver the GBU-28, the heaviest bunker-buster munition in the American arsenal, weighing 5,000 pounds. This deployment sends a clear message to Khamenei that Iran's nuclear facilities, including Fordo and Natanz, buried hundreds of meters underground, are no longer secure. A closer look at the technical details further underscores the seriousness of the operation. The type of cargo carried by 10 C-17 Globemaster transport aircraft that departed from RAF Fairford in the United Kingdom reveals the scale of preparation. OSINT analysts note that these aircraft were not carrying bombs alone, but also advanced electronic warfare pods designed specifically to blind Iran's air defense systems. The direct violation of Iranian airspace by a P-8A Poseidon reconnaissance aircraft marked the first phase of this plan. The aircraft detected Iran's S-300 radar systems, as well as the domestically produced Bavar 373 radar, recording their active frequencies. Now, 358 Tomahawk cruise missiles aboard Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, including the USS Mitchell and USS McFall, are standing by, programmed to fly digital routes tailored to those radar frequencies. The expected arrival of the USS Abraham Lincoln within 72 hours signals that time is a critical factor. Reports indicate the carrier transited near the Indian coastline. Analysts assess that its arrival could significantly increase tensions. Its entry into the U.S. Central Command area of responsibility would elevate operational readiness across the region. Experts are now closely examining the strategic importance of this 72-hour window. In this context, expectations appear to be focused on accelerating the military chess game. According to analysts, the ship's route is heading toward the Gulf of Oman. However, the outcome of this move remains uncertain. Expert assessments, drawing on reporting from Fox News, suggest these developments may be compressing the timeline of the crisis and intensifying time pressure. Ultimately, the anticipated arrival underscores U.S. determination. Technical details also include the vessel's speed capabilities, indicating that this strategy may involve rapid deployment. This expectation can be seen as part of a fast-paced escalation cycle. The development appears to bring the possibility of conflict even closer. From aircraft carriers to B-2 bombers, every element reflects the full spectrum of American military power. The elevated alert status suggests U.S. forces may be at the highest level of readiness. This posture appears to enhance emergency response capabilities. Analysts assess that the alert is directly tied to rising tensions, with forces potentially operating at DEFCON levels. Experts are examining how personnel and equipment are being integrated into these preparations. In this context, the warning posture reinforces deterrence. According to analysis, the situation is a direct response to Iranian threats, although the duration of the alert remains undefined. The domino effect created by this massive military buildup has shaken the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East like an earthquake, paralyzing every nerve ending of civilian life, the economy, and diplomacy. The first major shock was felt in civil aviation. The decision by major airlines such as Lufthansa, Air France, KLM, and Swiss to indefinitely suspend flights to Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia signals that the region has effectively been disconnected from the global transportation network. These companies are not only anticipating the risk of open conflict, but also a massive electronic warfare storm poised to erupt across the region, one that could completely disable radar systems. The most devastating psychological blow, however, came from Moscow. The Russian Foreign Ministry's call for its citizens to leave Iran immediately amounts to a death sentence for Tehran. The Kremlin understands it cannot stand against the U.S. armada looming over Iran, a country it has long described as a strategic ally. The Russian evacuation pushed the regime into international isolation and complete marginalization. This is the clearest indication that Putin has removed the Iran card from the table and abandoned Tehran to its fate. Inside the regime, an atmosphere of total panic prevails. The sudden cancellation of the weekly Friday sermon attended by Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, citing security concerns, is the strongest evidence yet that the leadership has been physically shaken. Intelligence reports suggest that Khamenei may have been evacuated to a secret bunker in the desert region northeast of Tehran. With the leader withdrawn from public view, the harsh statement by Tehran's chief prosecutor Ali Salehi, claiming that Trump is talking nonsense and that executions will continue, appears to be little more than an attempt to suppress internal fear. The scope of the logistical and economic isolation points towards severing all of Iran's regional lifelines. The well-known U.S. warning to the Iraqi government, "Cut ties with Iran or lose your oil revenue," forced Baghdad into an existential choice. The threat of draining Iraq's state treasury would effectively shut down Iran's largest financial gateway in the region. This strangulation strategy condemns the regime to starvation from within and technological blindness from without. Every C-17 cargo aircraft that takes off and every civilian flight that is canceled tightens the noose around the Iranian regime. It is a domino effect, a trigger pulled in Washington that turns into a wave of unrest on the streets of Tehran, bringing the regime to an end.
We also cannot ignore the economic dimension of this event. For the United States to undertake operational preparations on such a massive scale means that billions of dollars from its defense budget can disappear in a matter of moments. The fact that the daily operating cost of a single aircraft carrier runs into the millions underscores how serious the threat must be for Washington to willingly absorb that expense. Amid rising inflation and ongoing debates over the debt ceiling, the American public is questioning whether their tax dollars should be spent on a potential risk of a world-scale conflict in the Middle East. Yet, in the geopolitical arena, a vacuum is unacceptable. The fear that China or Russia could fill that vacuum if the United States pulls back remains the Pentagon's strongest motivating factor. Now let us step back and place this situation in historical context. Recall Operation Praying Mantis in 1988. After a U.S. frigate struck an Iranian naval mine, the United States Navy sank half of Iran's navy within hours. The force currently present in the region is 10 times more destructive than it was in 1988. A single miscalculation, one overly eager radar operator pressing the fire button, could trigger one of the largest naval battles in history. The U.S. military's official refusal to disclose its DEFCON level shows that it is deliberately using uncertainty as a weapon. It is one thing for your enemy not to know when you might strike. Not knowing how far you are willing to go is an absolute nightmare. Analysts, particularly in U.S. media, argue that this buildup is intended to provide a protective shield against a potential Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. If Israel were to launch a unilateral attack under the justification of its own security, the United States would assume a policing role, using its aircraft carriers to prevent other regional actors from intervening. In other words, this mass of steel effectively acts like a set of handcuffs, restraining every player in the region. But every chain can eventually break. Harassment of U.S. bases in the region by Iranian proxy forces is testing the patience of this immense power day by day. What we witnessed in the first month of 2026 was not merely preparation for a military operation, but a strategic checkmate against the Iranian hegemony that has shaped the Middle East for the past 40 years. The Trump administration's naval initiative represents a doctrinal shift that redefines America's global power projection. The most critical element of this strategy is found in the 2026 National Defense Strategy published by the Pentagon. As the document clearly states, the Iranian regime is weaker and more vulnerable than it has been in decades. This is not just a military assessment, but a plan of action. The most effective move in this strategic game is embedded within the colossal demonstration of force made up of 7,800 assets that Trump called an armada. This structure, formed around the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group 3, goes far beyond a typical carrier deployment, evolving into an air and naval force of between 200 and 250 units. More than 100 fighter aircraft and bombers are coordinating operations in the air.
The United States now has over 40,000 personnel in the Middle East, and its air defense umbrella, supported by THAAD batteries, is designed to completely crush Iran's asymmetric warfare doctrine carried out through proxy forces. Reza Pahlavi's request for air support handed the administration the moral justification and political legitimacy it needed to execute this military operation.
By positioning Reza Pahlavi as an alternative leader, Trump is marketing his armada as a rescue force, one that protects the people in the name of this new leadership. This is psychological warfare at the highest level. Even if Khamenei were to hear the sound of Tomahawk missiles from his hiding place, it could push the internal cracks within the regime to the point of open rebellion. Russia's travel warning and the evacuation of its citizens represent the final piece on this strategic chessboard. Moscow chose not to perish alongside Iran in a war it knew it could not win. The current tension appears to be closing off diplomatic solutions. As the military buildup continues, the situation risks further escalation. Analysts assess that this pressure now threatens regional stability. The confrontation between Iran and the United States is also impacting Iran's proxy forces. Experts are examining whether this escalation is directly tied to economic sanctions. In this context, the current situation appears to be shutting the door on negotiations altogether. According to analysts, the level of tension may ultimately require international intervention, although the path to resolution remains uncertain. Many experts point to the deep historical roots of this confrontation. By assembling such an enormous force in the region, Washington is either executing the largest bluff in its history or genuinely preparing for the final move in the Great Game. With so many weapons already in place, talking about peace becomes more difficult by the day. When the waters finally recede, only one truth will remain: either a new dawn for the Iranian people or permanent darkness for the Middle East. It grew late. In Tehran, the sermons fell silent and the roar of engines grew louder. The air support that Pahlavi requested on behalf of the people has now materialized as an armada of steel in the Persian Gulf. With Trump's finger on the trigger, the regime has no negotiating table left and nowhere left to hide. Thank you for watching Above Military. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video to support us. We have also activated channel memberships. If you want to stand with us and support our growth, you can do so through subscriptions, super chat, and by joining the channel.